Welcome dear students for the session 30 of System Software of BCA program 3rd semester affiliated to Kuvempu University. So in this session 30 we will be learning about the algorithm and flowchart for processing the macro definitions which you have learnt in the previous class. Let's have a recap of our previous class. In the previous class you got a complete idea about the different database formats and the specifications we are going to use in our macro processor. We have understood the different tables which are being used and how the data is being stored in them along with the format pertaining to the pass1 as well as the pass2. So learning objective of today's session is to understand the algorithm and the flowchart for the processing macro definition. Session outcomes is the student will be able to understand the algorithm for processing the macro definition. So now you already know what do you mean by an algorithm and even you know what do you mean by flowchart. In this session, we'll be discussing about the algorithmic part of our macro definitions there. So algorithm, it stands for a step-by-step procedure to solve a problem. In the same way, in our today's session, what we are going to do is, we will be having the algorithm for the pass1 of our macro definition. So the below shows the flowchart or the algorithm for the macro definition there. See, the algorithm makes a line-by-line scan over the input, and the read refers to the fetching of successive input lines from secondary storage into a workspace. Now let's have the pass1 macro definition algorithm there. In the step number 1, what we are going to do here is, here we are going to use two tables, that is your MDTC and the MNTC, which we have learnt in the previous session for the task of initialization. Once it has been initialized with your MDTC and your MNTC, the second step is to read the next source card. You remember that the source card, it is 80 bytes of width. So once the source card has been read in the step number 3, here we have to do some condition checking. That is, you have to check whether if macro macro pseudocode, that is, you have encountered the starting of a macro. So if yes, you have got a macro pseudocode, then we have to do some series of executions there. So it has been represented as the step A from your step 3 there. So here you have to read the next source card. Next, in the step B, enter the macro name and the current value of the MDTC in the MNT entry number MNTC. The next is you have to increment your MNTC value. Next, you have to prepare your ALA. You know why we are using the ALA there. So once the ALA has been prepared, you have to enter the macro name card into our MDT table, that is macro definition table. So once it has been done, you have to increment our MDTC table so that we can fetch the next instruction. Now read the next source card. Substitute the index notation for all the arguments. Then in the next step, enter the line into your macro definition table. Then increment again your MDTC table. Now you have to check whether you have encountered the MEND, which refers to the macro end statement. If you have encountered MEND, then you go to the step number 2. That is, step number 2 is read the next source card. If it is not an MNDT, then you go to the step number 3, where step number 3 refers to check again whether it is MCRO pseudocode, then perform starting from A to your J. Else, write the copy of the source code in the step number 4 of the algorithm, then followed by the step number 5. If you encounter the end, then go to the pass number 2, else go to the step number 2. So this is the algorithm for the pass1 of your macro definition. I think you got insights about how to have the algorithm for the macro processing of the macro definitions there. So now let's have one of the MCQ. So I'll ask the MCQ orally, what is the full form of MDC? So MDC stands for macro definition table. The second one is the instruction format RR has a length of how many bytes? 2 bytes. So the session summary, the student will be able to understand the algorithm for processing the macro definition. For further studies, you can refer the book entitled System Programming, authored by John Donovan.